Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on the podcast, I'm very lucky, honored, delighted to have Joe Vandecar on the podcast. He is an ex-Apple employee, a veteran, author of Anxiously Fearless, which is expected out in May. And yeah, he has many other monikers as well. But how are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. How are you today?
Oh, I am good. You know what? I have to say, you are my first podcast of 2023. So, yes, yes.
First one through the door. Here we go.
Oh, yes. And I'm looking forward to this. Like, yeah, I have to ask, Joe. Now, like, okay, let's just say you have had high skill sets for quite a number of your like jobs, but you started as a humble noodle guy. How did you get from humble noodle guy to like US like intelligence officer to ex Apple employee? And I don't mean in
Ah,
Apple store either.
no, working out in Cupertino. Yeah, no, it's been a crazy journey. I would actually say it started before that. It started at McDonald's and working as a cashier at McDonald's, and then managing a noodles restaurant, and joining the Navy and getting to Apple. It's been a wild ride, and there's no secret formula. It was taking risks, I think. just
Taking
just
risks.
taking risks.
Okay, like this is the thing. One of the things I like, okay, no, don't get me wrong. Like everyone's got to do a job when they're coming up through, like, yeah,
Yeah.
college, university, and everything like this. But so, what made you do the jump from, say, noodles
Yeah.
to the U.S. Navy?
So that was the you hear a lot that the people you surround yourself with are going to influence your life. And it was at a time in my life, I was graduating from Michigan State University. It was in the height of the '08 recession. Jobs were very scarce. And so I had to work, as you said. And so I had the opportunity to be a manager at a noodles restaurant. So I took it so I could continue paying my rent. And about a year in, I remember having a mini breakdown in like a laundromat with one of my friends, who was a Marine, and he kind of turned me around to the military and was like, "You should explore this." And it was something I never thought I could do. But he said absolutely and gave me the confidence to explore it. And that's how that transition started. Yeah.
So, talking to a Marine into the Navy, how?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like,
So you got to know yourself, and I knew I was not a Marine.
okay,
So yeah, my dad was a Marine. I know how hardcore they are. They are, really hardcore. And so I knew I was not cut out for the Marines.
like, did your dad look like you spat on his favorite football team when you went, "I'm joining the Navy"? Right?
Yeah, he was confused. At first he was like, "Why?" And why? I think that's the question I got. He was like, "No."
Yeah. Oh, it's like okay, like, but did you decide from the get-go to be like an intelligence officer, or did they just simply look at your sort of paperwork and went, you know what? Why don't you play? Why don't you come over this way? Like, yeah.
No, yeah. That was interesting. So actually, I settled, not settled. I chose the Navy because I talked to all four. So in the U.S., we have the Army, the Marines, the Navy, and the Air Force. And so I did my due diligence and I talked to each one, and I just found that the Navy fit my timeline and my skill set and
Mm.
stuff like that. And they actually asked me if I wanted to be a pilot, because apparently everybody wants to be a pilot. And again, I said no. I was like, "You mean landing planes on boats?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Absolutely not. That's not my skill set." And so I really like people. I really like investigating and finding out kind of like how to put different pieces of information together. And that's when intelligence rose to the top for me.
Ah, I
Yeah.
I am curious. Like, okay, what did you have as an idea of what the Navy would be compared to what reality would be? Because you have an idea of the armed forces already
Yeah.
had and from your friend, but that's coming from like okay, like from like yeah, sacrifice Marine Corps. You know what I mean? Yeah. And when you
Yeah.
Navy, come on.
Yeah. So I imagined that it would be way more organized than it actually ended up being. Like you always think you hear military precision, right? Things are done with military precision
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It's a lot more chaotic than you expect. It's one of those things that once I joined and got to peek behind the curtain, I was like, oh, this is a lot different than I expected.
Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. So
Yeah.
you're like, oh my God, the chaos, the madness. Like,
Yeah. And it was operating in that chaos and madness. That I think that is the military precision that they talk about. Is like even when things are not going to plan or there's threats or there's, broken equipment and stuff like that, it's
mm,
being able to complete the mission. That's the precision I think that they offer. Not the precision I had in mind when I joined. I thought it was like, oh, every day will be the same and you do things in a certain way and you execute, and that's not how life was.
eh, come on now. You're doing like you're an intelligence officer. Come on. Well,
Yeah.
like if every day was the same, I'm like, dear God. Like, yeah. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
ah. So
yeah.
with this, like, okay, how long were you in the military for? Was it like, yeah,
About 5 years. Yeah,
5 years?
yeah,
And with that sort of 5 years, like if you had to sit down, okay, that stupid teenager who signed up compared to like
yeah.
army vet, what came out, like what would you say was the sort of biggest takeaway you got from there?
Going back to what I said, operating in chaos. So it was instead of thinking that things are going to flow smoothly and that you needed to have 100% of your ducks in a row before you act. The biggest thing I've probably taken away is that 80%, if you have an 80% solution to something, you should probably get moving on it because that's enough to learn and iterate and change. So don't get stuck waiting for everything to be perfect. Like get moving.
I like that. I like that. Yes, because I think, like I've said it before and I'll say it again, people just get too caught up sometimes with the realm of perfection. We've got to,
Yeah.
everything's got to be lined up in a perfect way so I can get things started and get things going. And unfortunately for these people, perfection is the biggest illusion uh,
Yeah.
ever like predicated on us all. It's like, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't exist. And I think we have we have this misbelief that people notice everything, right? And then they notice everything that we notice. And so we think like, oh, because we know our flaws, that somebody else obviously notices them too. And it's just not the case. People don't have the capacity for that, right? And so I think when we get hung up on perfection, that's what we're getting hung up on stuff that doesn't have benefit to us to begin with.
Absolutely. Or they notice, but they don't really care if you
Right.
yeah. So it's like kind of a weird, like it's a weird thing what goes on there, you know?
Yeah, on a small level, it's like you go to a party and you're like, oh, somebody's gonna make fun of me for my shoes. And it's like nobody's looking down at your shoes. And if they did, they're too worried about their own mindset to like
Yeah. No,
be concerned.
they've got some inherent flaws in themselves which they're trying to deflect from.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Pointing at your feet, going, "What are those?" No. So,
exactly. Yeah, now every time I go into a party, somebody's like, what shoes are you wearing? Of
like,
course.
trust me, if I was in your company, I would not mock your shoes. I I almost already mocked myself. Who knows? Who knows? It's like, yeah. Um, so with this now, with the how can I say controlled chaos of the military, how did that compare to the corporate world, corporatino, like Apple, like the big Apple,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
say the gigantic Apple, the amount of money what goes through that place, so no more.
Yeah, yeah, it was completely. I mean, it was a 180, right? Just the biggest thing I learned there is that culture doesn't stop at borders, right? There's different cultures in any organization you're in. If you get more than three people together, it seems like they're going to form a culture. And so, going from a military culture where things were a little bit more regimented, even if they were chaos, Apple was the Wild West. Like you really brought your whole self to it because there was problems of different complexities and people just operated differently. And so where in the Navy, you always operated as a unit, right? So you were always, it was your command, it was your ship. It was stuff like that. At Apple, it was maybe you and your team, but other than that, there wasn't that cohesiveness.
Mm. Did you kind of miss sort of the camaraderie of what the Navy sort of provided compared to, okay, you say a team in Apple, like you know how like a team is different to like sort of like, yeah, a
Yeah.
group sort of real mission, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I was probably the biggest thing I missed as soon as I left the Navy was that feeling because in the Navy, everything you wear is part of your identity. You're right. You wear a uniform. Everybody wears the same uniform. You're working towards the same mission. You live in the same geographical area, and you're all screwed if things go wrong, right? Where in the corporate world, that's very different. And it's not unique to Apple. It's very much like you can be out for yourself, and you can, you know, one team of a company can kind of throw another team under the bus as long as it makes them look a little better. And that all is very was very different.
No,
Little more lonely, a little more lonely. Like,
yeah, because the reason why I asked this is one of those things where, okay, any like most people who do service, like do a service, like they're in the military, in the police, like in the fire brigade, whatever sort of service it is, and they sort of come out of that world. Sometimes that sort of going from like service to civvy street
mhm.
is very hard, and being able to sort of like have that focus and be able to like get that sort of self-development down to get onto that next level is a very hard transition for many a person, which has done what you've done, you know?
Yeah, yeah. The biggest, I would flip that a little bit too, that sometimes in the military, or at least my experience in this was the self-development lacked a little bit because you were part of a unit, right? Because you're always thinking about the whole. And so one thing that motivated me out of the Navy was that very thing where it was hard to do the self-reflection, the self-awareness, the self-development because you were giving so much. But there's always a negative side to that, right? And once you leave, you kind of lose that support network, and now you kind of lose that, yeah, just the built-in camaraderie that was there.
Because like this is the thing, I think a number of people currently out like out in the world, and not
Mm.
just like doing the service and everything like this, they sometimes miss that period of time where they can do self-development or look to do self-development because it's easy to invest in time and money, energy, whatever into something else. But when it comes to themselves,
Mm.
they desperately fall short. Yeah, like you help people with that type of thing, don't you?
That is, yeah, that is my now that is my focus now. It took me a long time to come around in my own life to the self-awareness, self-development,
Mhm.
um, and to understand just how much energy I was wasting not doing that, right? A lot of us get raised with the idea of like, oh, spending time for yourself or spending time on yourself is selfish. And so we push it to the back burner, we push it to the back burner. And when that happened, that's what I did for years. And it wasn't until I left Apple that I realized like, no, the ticket is we have everything we need, right? We need to develop that.
Yeah, no, but this is the thing. Like, as you say, people push things to the back burner, but the whole thing is when you start doing that, you can't, how can I put it? You're the constant in your life.
Yes.
And
You're the only
yeah. And if you're not really taking care of that constant, like, yes, either constant negative things will happen or constant positive things will happen. Randomly, life will come and play its game and throw its curveballs your way. But if you're not putting that time investment in yourself to sort of grow, develop, and build, I think I think a lot of people are lost because they're not doing that currently.
100%. And I think this is the paradox of life. One of them, I think life is full of paradoxes, but the idea that, I have people tell me all the time, well, I don't have time to journal or self-reflect because I need to do this project for work. Because if I do this project for work, I might get promoted, right? And it's a very short-sighted, like, yes, there is an immediate reward, but that's not sustainable over time. Whereas if you develop yourself to be nimble and you learn what your triggers are, you learn what your strengths are and stuff like that, then you can over time make more progress, I think. And so the paradox is by investing in yourself, you can actually handle new situations better
Mm.
over time. And so it's playing the long game in my mind rather than just tackling the thing that's right in front of you.
Like the long game. And like with regards to sort of getting the long game, like getting involved in long game, how would you say someone can start down that path?
Yeah, I think it's my theory is the entire thing is self-awareness, right? So when you like you said earlier, our only constant is ourselves. So think about where you were 10 years ago, think about where you were 15 years ago, and think about the most stressful times in your life and the things that you thought about might not have been the most effective, right? Because maybe you weren't tuned into your true core values or your true desires.
Mm.
That was definitely the situation for me. I was in survival mode most of my life, right? I started out like at 17. Um, on my own, kicked out of the house, and I had to figure out a way forward. And so I was making decisions not based on maybe my greatest strengths and stuff like that, but on surviving. And many of us who have been in that situation don't really ever let go of that. And so I think starting with the self-awareness and understanding how our minds are operating, what scripts we're running, that is where to start.
Mm. Yeah, when you say survival mode, I think people don't realize when you're in survival mode, there is, how can I say it? You can't really have, like, there is no sort of outlook for the future. There is no
No.
sort of like thinking like 2 years, 3 years, a decade, or what that like bright future could possibly be. It's just about the here and now and how can I get through that next day or the next hour or so.
Yep.
Which quite fatiguing, you know?
It's exhausting. And then you think, and then I think we have this idea that once we're out of survival mode, right? So the famine is over, we have enough to eat, we know where our next paycheck is coming from, that we're going to stop thinking in those ways. And our brain doesn't do that. So our brain is a predictive machine, right? And I don't like to use the word machine, but it's the closest analogy we have. But it basically future based on inputs from the past, right? So if all we know is survival and all we know is how to think in these short-term sprints and not long-term gains, that doesn't just go away as soon as we have enough. And so I help a lot of people like me who have come from this scarcity background. And once they're out of it, maybe they're in a place of abundance, they're still thinking in these exhaustive ways. And then their anxieties are peaking. And they're just, because they haven't taken the time maybe to get to know their triggers or how their mind is operating, they don't recognize it as maladaptive, right? They think, no, this is just, I'm thinking on my feet, I'm thinking quick. And it's not the way it is.
No, I think sometimes it's a bit like a old wound.
Mm-hmm.
You get wound depending on how deep that wound goes. It takes that's how long it might seem like it's healed, but yes, on the cold days you still feel the ache if you get what I mean. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I think about too is we all have, oh, I say this, maybe people don't. Um, I've talked to other people though that have inner voices, right? I don't know if you have an inner monologue. I think some people may be seeing pictures and stuff like that, but I have I have an inner monologue that runs a lot of the time. Um, and usually that's where my anxiety is, right? And it'll come up and it'll be like, oh, you shouldn't try to do that because if you fail, then, people are gonna never give you anything again.
mm,
Um, Understanding that our inner monologue isn't really our own. It's developed over time and it's been developed since we were children. And we can influence it, but like it's our brain telling us a narrative. And I think once we understand where that narrative comes from, that's when we can start to move on in a more healthy and beneficial direction in our life. That's what I've been exploring in the book, that concept.
yeah. No, I think there is many a little voice what goes off in our head. Like like basically that negative son of a bitch what lives there on a basis, like telling you like all kinds of horrid things if you ever spoke them out into the world.
Could you Yeah, could you imagine if you spoke to me the way that your voice speaks to you? I would end this call and be like, never talk to this
Oh,
person again.
I got
And you never would, right? You just never would speak this way. And yet here we are. One of my chapters focuses on the words that we use with ourselves
mm,
and how limiting we are in the way that we think. And it could be something as simple as like, oh, I have to do something, right? I have to do this podcast. And it's like, maybe you have to, maybe somebody told you that you absolutely must, but when you think about those limiting ways, you like limit creativity instead of this being an opportunity to connect with you and to connect with your audience. I'm seeing it as like, oh, something I just have to check off. Simply switching the words of like, oh, I get to do this podcast. It's like, now I can start thinking about different things that this podcast brings to me and I can bring to it, right? So just changing those little words in the way we speak to ourselves. And then that's not even considering the nasty things we say to ourselves, like, oh, you are too lazy to do that, or you are so stupid. Nobody's going to want to hear what you have to say, right? Could you imagine? Like,
I got to say, if that's the way your inner voice is talking to you, that you've got a very polite inner voice.
no, yes, exactly. That is true. That is true. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
because you've got that going on, and then like you've got the voice which wants to keep you safe, which wants to
yeah,
keep you out of harm's way. Not as militant, but it's like yeah, you'll go, oh yeah, you heard what that son of a bitch said? Yeah. But you know what? A point, do that, you're gonna get hurt. Let's stay,
yeah,
let's stay safe. And it's one of those things people often listen to that voice too much because
very much.
there is no like people desire growth, people want desire change, people want to do grand things, at least they say they do. But
Yeah,
when like those two voices come into play, it's like, okay, right, people stay where they are, people stop,
yeah,
don't go forward. But there is the third voice, which, and like people like, I've got more voices. Okay, see a shrink. There's another story.
yeah,
But, but there is the third voice, the cheerleader, which is like, yeah,
yeah,
when you need to get up, when you need to do that, they're there to support, like guide you through it. But they need you to have that spark, that initial get up and go, because they've got to work against, yeah, two big voices, which are one trying to keep yourself safe, and the other one which is not your friend.
just credit. Yeah, just
Yeah.
absolutely asinine. Yeah, no, the way that you're putting it is a great way of thinking about it. I titled the book Anxiously Fearless because I think people anxiety is a common thing. It's getting worse in our societies, right? Like with all of our distractions and pressures, but you still have to take the step forward, right? You still want to move forward, you still want to grow. And so you need to be fearless to do that. And so I don't think you need to get rid of anxiety. I think sometimes we get really focused on that it's like, oh, well, once I take care of my anxiety, then I can go work harder or go build my own business or go write a book. And it's like, no, it doesn't quite work that way. I mean, like you can work in tandem. And the second part of the book is retraining your inner voice to go from being an asshole to an ally. So taking that negative inner voice that some of us let, reign supreme in our head and retraining it and being like, wait. That's not productive for me. Like, I think, yeah, oh, gosh, I was raised to be like, you should be your harshest critic. That's the best way to go forward. Because if you're your harshest critic, then nobody else can tell you shit. But what happens when you do that is you actually shut yourself off to a lot of new experiences and other people's perspectives, right? And so you can get lost in that. And so I think a better way to do that is like be curious about your behavior. Why am I doing something a certain way? What is causing me to be anxious? Or, what brings me joy and why? And then retrain that inner voice to actually be your ally. Like seek out the things that help you grow, seek out the things that are better for you. And I think what you'll find is you'll start to shed a lot of those behaviors that aren't benefiting you, right? And that's where I think the joy comes in is once you can get rid of that inner critic retrained, the growth can start. Change is still hard, right? It's never easy. It's simple. It's coming back day after day and doing the hard stuff, right? But it's just not easy.
Yeah, no, well, no, this is true. Like pain isn't like, well, change isn't
Yeah.
the, and like the whole thing is people like one of the things, and like this is the reason why I'm glad that I have got you on around about this time of year. I wonder what's been said.
Oh yeah.
Like I want to make a resolution to do X,
Yeah.
Y, Z. It's like you've just made a list of all the things you want to just say no to in the most
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but
And
like I was like I
no,
was
go ahead. Sorry.
no worries. No, I was going to say people, I think many a person in this day and age don't actually understand the true price, or they haven't worked
Yep.
some like weighed up the cost of what that change
Mm.
could be. Like everyone sees the positive upside, but the negative downside. Uh, which also has to be paid. Like it's going to move you in a
Hmm.
positive direction, but there is a positive and a negative which have to both be paid. And it's just a case of you got to be willing to pay that price to make it happen. If you don't, it never will, and you'll still be the same, you know?
Yeah, you'll still be the same. And there's also the idea if you don't understand where your desires came from in the first place, right? So if you come up with a resolution and it's to exercise more because you want six pack abs, right? That's a very common one you always hear. Um, that's great. Where did that idea come from? Were you sitting on the couch and you're like, oh, the only reason I'm not happy right now is because I don't have six pack abs? Or did you see an advertisement that six pack abs will make you happy, right? If you're not tying your resolutions or your goals, let's use a better term here, a goal is something that you want to achieve that's going to take effort. So, finishing a bag of chips is not really a goal because that's not something that you're going to have to like,
Oh,
go out of your way to do. You can just do
Joe,
it. You can
Joe,
just do it.
depending where you are and what time in life, that bag of chips.
Yeah, you're just going to do it, right? So that's not a goal. That's something that you're just going to accomplish. A goal would be like exercising is a goal because a lot of us have to go out of our way to do it. We have to change a lifestyle. We have to stop drinking so much the night before so that we're not hungover, so that we can get to the gym, right? So there's a lot. A goal is not just a desired outcome. It's something that you're going to have to work towards. And if you're not aligning that effort, like you said, the cost, if you're not aligning that to something that is intrinsically motivating to you, so not for outside recognition, but for inside recognition, you're going to burn out. And then you're just more frustrated. And then you're just given that critical inner voice a lot more firepower to be like, well, you tried to get better last year, remember, but you were just kind of fat and lazy.
Mm.
And then you're not, maybe this year's resolution, you are more tuned in. You're like, I want to start making more income on the side. So I have more autonomy. Well, instead of, if that aligns to your cores and your values, you need to start ignoring that inner voice that was like, well, yeah, but remember when you tried to get skinny and you didn't? And like, why do you think you can do this now? Right. So it's like understanding that when you align your goals to your core values, you're going to go so much further. But you need to do the work to understand what your core values are. And that's the self-awareness point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like this is the thing. One of like I would say most people in this world kind of know themselves about 30, possibly 40% if they really know themselves well. Anyone who like knows that like, oh, I know 100% of myself. All I've got to say is wary of those people because they've done
Mm.
like some great things and dark things all at the same time. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. But I just think there is not enough time in it. Well, there is enough time for people to do the investment in themselves to find out more about themselves, but people don't seem to be doing it, and it seems to be getting a lot worse if you go out.
Yeah, there's two things. So there's actually been research done, and I sorry that I don't have it on the top of my hands. I can send you the citation. That this research was done that basically they asked people how well do you think you know yourself, and I think 85% of respondents said very well or something like that, or they were like, yep, we know ourselves very well. And then when they actually did the research, and what they ended up doing was they ended up looking at self-assessments, and then they asked like three of their closest friends the same questions about this person. Come to find out, it was like 15% of people knew themselves, like the had scored high on this. And so it's like at least 60% of people are lying to themselves, right? And my numbers might be off, but the idea was that the majority of people who thought they were very self-aware actually just did not have the awareness that they think they did. And so it's a pervasive thing that we think that just because again it's our voices that we, if we didn't take time to understand where they came from, we really don't understand ourselves, right? And then back to your time thing, there's a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance, right? Which is where you have competing ideas in your head. And so you may think that you are, um, you may identify as a very hardworking individual, but you maybe are not, right? And so instead of realizing that there's a disconnect between your identity and your actions, you just kind of ignore it because the cognitive dissonance is really exhausting for us.
Mm.
And compound that, the inclination for us to not be mentally uncomfortable with all of the distractions around us, right? If I want a dopamine hit, I'm just going to pick up my phone and look at Instagram, right? I'm not going to take the 5 minutes to understand why I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to distract myself. And I think that just compounds over time. Anything that we do over time, whether it's good or bad, you kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the episode,
Yes.
anything we do over time is going to compound. So if we continually do not so great things over time, we're going to get not so great results. If we continue to do development things over time, we will develop over time.
Mm. Yeah. And like this is the thing. As you say, if we do development things over time, like for moving from to being all right to good to above average to excellent, it doesn't take that much effort.
Just sustained. It
Yeah.
literally just like maybe an hour a day. Like there are people who say 30 minutes a day, but like if you could think about like an hour a day
Mm.
and you spend it on yourself, it doesn't have to be a consecutive hour, but if you journal 20 minutes in the morning and you read a development article in the evening. If you do that day after day, if you're increasing by 1% the knowledge day after day in yourself, it's exponentially grows over time. It's
Mm.
really, really, really fascinating.
Yeah. One of the things I often say is to be 2% better each and every
Yeah.
day, because you can't always hit that 2%. You might hit 1%, you might hit no,
Yeah.
but if you kind of look at yourself like 100 days down the road, you've you've considerably improved, you know.
Yeah.
I think another thing what also I think ties into a lot of people's problem in this day and age, because okay, I don't like you're a youngish chap, so like
I'll take it. I'll take it.
like this is the thing. You may remember the sort of the tail end days of like not Netflix, but blockbusters,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yep.
if you wanted to watch the latest film, you had to. And I've been in America. I know what that is like on Friday night when all those films come out. You have to get up, get out of your house, depending which part of America you're in. It might be cold, wet, miserable. If it's winter, in the summertime,
Yep.
baking hot. Like, yeah, feel like you're gonna cook by the time you get in the car to the actual store. But you had to take a huge chunk of time to get up, get out, go to a blockbuster. Then you get to the section where you'll see like the 20, like where the 20 videos of the latest blockbusters meant to come out. Then,
Yep.
and all you'll see is just,
Placard.
yeah. So it was like, then you have to spend an extra half an hour, 40 minutes looking for your alternative choice. And then you pick up this random thing and another random thing. Then you got to go all the way back home, watch it,
Yep.
and like return it back in a like 2 or 3 days. And like,
Yeah.
and that was a regular occurrence.
You
Now,
had to plan it. Yeah. You had to plan it out. It was like
yeah,
go pick up the pizza, return the movies, pick up new movies. Like,
you had steps. You had like, it wasn't instant gratification.
yeah.
Us today, right now, I can pick up my phone. You can pick up your phone and go, yeah, Netflix, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And away. And I think people are so used to that instant gratification like mindset at this present time that, yeah, I like they go, I want to be rich, I want to be fitter, I want to be smarter. And but they don't sort of like, oh yeah, it's gonna take time. Are you like can you commit to 100 days?
Yeah.
Like to this? I said, no, because like 100 days in my mind is when you start to see real results for
Mhm.
anything. It's like you can do a lot in 100 days. Look, damn, like Frick, you can do a lot in 20 hours. You can get qualified in like many like different things, which can increase your income like that.
Yeah.
But 100 days commitment, just like showing up 100 times. Do it, do it, do it, do it. You might not be like where you want to truly be. You might have to give it another 100 days. You might have to give it another 100 days. And if it's not working, then you might need to like go, hey, I need help. Can
Yeah.
someone help me? Which I don't think a lot of people do, you know?
No. And back to your thing about the time. So yes, it takes time to build a habit, to build success, to write a behavior or even retrain your inner voice. But the thing about time is it's going to pass regardless,
Yes.
right? So what it actually takes is effort and intention. And I think that's what some people, and I myself have lacked this, and I'm still working on it in a lot of areas, is
Mm.
the intention. If you don't have the focused intent, and again, this goes back to aligning with your goals, aligning with, what is true to your identity, then the time is going to pass regardless, and you're not going to see any change or development. And so it's one of those things where it's like those 100 days, unless you're unfortunate enough to get hit by a bus, is going to pass. So are you spending 100 days looking at more Instagram or Netflix, reading more salacious news stories,
Mm.
or are you filling in some of that time with the development stuff? And so for me, that was journaling. That was my biggest breakthrough in my mid 30s. Was I made a commitment to journal 1 page every morning. So I didn't even set a time limit to it. I just said, and not even a full page. Like my journal's this size right here. I have it right next to me. Um, but I would write 1 page every morning, and it could be about anything. I could write about the color of the desk for all I care. But my commitment was to get the words on paper. And what I found happening is now I can't go a day without journaling. Like it's almost a reflex. And where I have an idea about something or I have an anxiety about something, or I was like, you know what? Instead of focusing on this goal of finishing my book, what if I start a podcast? And then I get to journal about it. And I was like, I would love to start a podcast someday, but right now my focus and my intention needs to be on this book, right? Because I have a purpose for it, and it's aligned with something that I want to do. And so that's one of those things where it's like taking that little bit of time every day, you soon build that muscle, and then it almost is no effort to begin with. And so that's the thing about time, like is developing over time is you just put the intent into it.
Mm. 10. Like, yeah, because wow, like, oh, that's very good. Oh, well done.
Like,
Like,
well, it's like one of those. It's like one of those things where it's like if you're going back to school when you're older, right? And you're like, man, by the time I graduate, I'm going to be 45 years old. And
mm,
it's like, well, how old are you going to be in 4 years if you don't graduate? You're going to be 45 years old. So it doesn't matter. We get stuck on these ideas where it's like the time is going to pass. It's what you choose to do with that time that matters.
yeah. And like this is the thing, with regards to how people spend their time, like the most valuable commodity we all have. Yeah,
Yeah.
never get it back again. But like, yeah, I think sometimes it's the cruise control element of life is one of those painful things. And like, yeah, I see it as a painful thing because it's easy. Like I kind of look it back at sort of moments where it's like, okay, right. How much time did I waste in this? No, don't get me wrong. Like when I was watching, like, yeah, Dragon Ball Z, yeah, basically the Cell Saga. How much freaking time was that? Like
Right. Right. Yeah.
hundreds of episodes, just like, yeah, like 10 episodes of him just charging up, and like, okay. And like you go, right, if you did something constructive then, or if you did something constructive that, like, I know, but it's one of those things
Yeah.
I can't, like, I look back at it. Do I look back at it with regret? It's like, no, it's a case of take the lesson from that time and
Exactly.
basically keep me in the present and then look to the future. Because, yeah, if I sort of dwell in it, and believe you me, I've done a hell of a lot of dwelling in my sort of past where, like, on things, yeah, which once you get into that cycle, it just keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going. And it takes a lot to pull you out of it. Well, it takes a lot,
Yep.
but when you do, you're like, oh, okay, now I can breathe again. You know? Huh.
And that's where I think the value of coming to understand that your inner voice, that dwelling, that spinning, is your brain processing a lot of different things, right? Our brain processes trillions of computations a second. It's insane. There's no computer even close to it, right? We're orders of magnitude above it, and it's almost like every neuron is a little mini computer running in tandem, right? So it's amazing power. Our consciousness is a very small part of that. And there's a lot of theories about what consciousness could be, but one of the ones that I love is it's our brain's ability to reflect on its past behavior, right? And so when we're experiencing this, we might be experiencing shame because it's like, man, I wasted all that time. Um, shame is not a beneficial emotion, but it is a byproduct of thinking, right? And so one of the great things about learning how your inner voice operates, whether it's operating on shame or scarcity or fear, or maybe you're really vain and like you're just a little bit too exuberant, like understanding that exactly, like, oh, nobody can touch this.
Huh.
Understanding that can help you avoid those pitfalls, right? Can help you avoid those spin cycles. And there are techniques and tactics out there, but you can count backwards, you can interrupt your thought processes, but until you understand what scripts your brain are running, I don't think you can effectively interrupt those cycles. And I think we'll waste a lot of time kind of spinning out on these things that aren't serving us anymore, right? Like you said, take the lesson. That is one of the best things about life is that we can reflect back on our time and be like, oh, well, I probably could have spent that a little more productively, but I did learn this and I know I won't do that again.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. No, very valid points. But like this is the thing. I have to ask, look, because you journal, what turned you truly on to like how did you discover that was the thing which was like, oh yeah, that's the on switch for this new path in your life.
Very similar to this. So I was listening to an audiobook by her name is Tara Schuster, and she wrote a book called Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, which was her kind of a memoir. It was an amazing book. It's hilarious. Highly recommend. But she went through this, she had a really hard time in her life and she kind of broke down her mental processes of like, why was she being so damn hard on herself? And
Mm.
one of the things was, she would see these flowers in the grocery store and she'd be like, well, they're like $7. I don't deserve them though. And then she's like, it's just buy yourself the fucking lilies, right? Like if it brings joy to your day, do it. And one of her things was journaling and being curious about her own thoughts. And I thought, this was the middle of the pandemic. Well, kind of the beginning of the pandemic. I was going through a really hard time at Apple. And I just set pen to paper and just started asking myself, like, why, this feeling of inadequacy? Why do you feel so inadequate? You're working at, the biggest company in the world. You're doing some really cool shit. Like, you're good at your job. Like, why on earth would you go to bed feeling less than? And that started me on a journey that was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I'm not always thinking my own thoughts, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because like, yeah, when you say Apple, like, yeah, especially when you're in the realms of Cupertino, like, yeah,
Yeah.
you like you are in the top three biggest companies in the world, one of the top three biggest companies in the world. Like,
Yeah.
so would you say it was a case of, okay, not to like just in that sort of moment in your life, there was like not enough fulfillment, or it was a case of you were living some form of life everyone expected you to live, but not what you wanted to live?
Yes. Yes. And I did not, there was unresolved issues and traumas from life, right? So just because, like I said, going back to the scarcity conversation we had, just because I was no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and just because I was, no longer, my brain hadn't made that switch fully either. And so one of the biggest things was I was definitely I was definitely trying to check off wickets in life, right? Get a high power job, do what you're supposed to do, make money, live this Instagram worthy life. And it just didn't align to my true core values. And so that was probably a big one.
Mm.
Um, and then just the allowing yourself, when you don't know yourself, you don't know your boundaries. And so I let myself be taken over by work for years. And I think that led to the burnout, which led to, once you burn out so bad in one area, it kind of crumbles around you. So relationships suffer, your dreams and motivation suffer, and you really question your self-worth. And that's where I finally recognized that there was a problem. And it was a little too late for me. Like in that job, I ended up having to leave, but that was the system.
Mm. Yeah, no, when you say burnout, people like people, I don't think people actually understand what that truly means. Because it's like going, you get people like, oh man, oh, I'm so burnt out. And it's like going, no, you're tired.
You think you are, you're tired. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
tired.
uh,
You need a rest.
yeah, but you're not burnt out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
to describe it to people in a sort of like most sort of like, yeah, this is like, I know it's subjective most really to yourself, but
Yeah.
just to give people an idea, you know?
If you've ever heard the phrase just bone tired,
Mm,
where it's not a, oh man, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or if I just take this nap, or give me three Red Bulls. It's your energy is so depleted that there's no restoration in normal processes, right? And what that ends up doing is it takes away the forward thinking, it takes away your problem solving skills, and it makes every threat, every anxiety seem insurmountable. And that was burnout for me. It was one of those things where it was just like all of a sudden I was up against a brick wall and there was no way around, up, over, or through. It was just like, oh, here we are. Like I've dug myself into this hole.
yeah, because it's one of those things where people, it it's weird because it's like it sneaks up on you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're just like going through your day today, and like, you know what I mean. One day it's just like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
how the
You're
hell?
like, I've done this 1,000 times and now I don't even know how to write this email, right? It was that like big of a cognitive break where it was just like, oh my gosh, like like, can I do this? And people are like, of course you can do this. You just got, a promotion. Like everybody believes in you and all this stuff. And you're like, yeah, but I don't believe in myself. I don't believe like, how do I even get where I am,
Yeah, like to take a line from from an Apple presentation, like courage, finding the courage to like sort of leave Apple to like basically do what you're doing now. Like, yeah, how did you like, you know what I mean? Like there you mentioned like, yeah, you left, but like was there
Yeah.
one sort of like, was it a case of like I'm so burnt out, I need to go, or like was there a time when you left and then it was like coaching is calling for you?
So more toward the second one for the coaching part. The leading part though, this is where I became a true believer in listening to yourself and the power of silence, right? So it was Christmas of 21. And I had gone home to rural Michigan, saw my grandmother, got back to DC, and it was like the December 27th, and I was just doing laundry, just quiet in my house. And I was loading. I remember clear as day. I was loading the laundry, and I realized I need more of this. I need more quiet. I need more. I wasn't thinking about work. I had another couple days off. And it was in that moment I decided that the first meeting of the new year of 2022 was going to be with my boss to put in my resignation. And it was just in that silence. It was in that moment of listening to myself saying, I can't go back and do this. Like something has to change. The scary part was I didn't know what that something was. And that came later. So I didn't realize, that there was a misalignment between my energies and my goals. I really like connecting with people. I really like helping people bring out the best in themselves. And I wasn't doing that at Apple. And beyond that, they were taking more than I could give. And so that I discovered later. But the moment to leave was just in that wonderful silence of the everyday where I was like, I don't know the way ahead, but I know it's not that direction. So I'm
Mm.
going to go ahead and take a right turn and see where it goes.
Okay, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but like this is the thing. Like, one of the things which I do kind of find a little bit fascinating and a little bit surprising because you go, okay, yeah, goodbye Apple, everything like this. Now, going into the realms of entrepreneurship,
Mm.
now, okay, now there's things you could do which are a little bit less stressful. Like, like having that sort of unity and support. Why, like, why the high stressed world of entrepreneurship, which is which has been known to be just a bit lonely?
So that is the best read that I've had in a while. It is lonely. And that is one thing that I wasn't prepared for when I jumped into this. But the part that drew me to it and that I will keep hammering it out is you want to talk about a path to discovery and self-discovery. Throw yourself into the unknown, right? Working a 9 to 5, or just working any, structured job or working something where somebody else is giving you the defined metrics that you need to hit
Mm.
is a lot easier than understanding what metrics you're willing to go for on your own, right? So I am trying to build, I wanted to write this book, and thankfully I had a great support network in that, but I still had to write the book, right? And there were times where people were like, let's go to brunch on a Saturday. And I had to be like, oh, no, I need to stay home and write, in this lonely world. Um, and that's just so illuminating. So I think anybody who's questioning their ability, like, oh, I can't be an entrepreneur for whatever reasons, or that, until you get out there and try to do that self-discovery, like you're not going to know. There's no way that you can mentally prepare for it. I think you just get into the trenches and figure it out.
Uh, in the trenches with a trusty bayonet at your side.
Right, right, right.
Stabby, stabby, let's go. Yeah, no, because like this is the other thing, and you kind of touched on it like slightly there, where yeah, you need to get the book done. With in that sort of world of being a business owner, like being an entrepreneur, it's like when you're working your 9 to 5, okay, look, you you have responsibilities, and the buck does kind of stop with you to a certain extent. And like, yeah, if you
Yeah,
like, slack off, yeah, you can get fired. But like at the end of the month, I don't know how, like it's either 2 weeks in America or at the end of the month,
yeah,
you get a paycheck. You
yeah,
get that money in your bank. You I know that is going to happen, especially on like if it's a big company, which is like, you know what I mean, been doing a like outstanding job, you are safe and secure.
yeah,
In the realm of entrepreneurship, business owner, yeah, you might work all the hours God sends and then some.
yeah,
Mm. But there is kind of no sort of set guarantee. Like, yeah, it's
yeah.
like you might get paid at the end of the month, you might not get paid at all, and you might get a bumper paycheck until it
Yep.
gets sort of stable. Yes,
And
that.
even when it's stable, it's not stable, right? It's one of those things where it's like you're going to have lean years and economic factors that you did not predict. And when you're out there as an entrepreneur, it can be very lonely.
Mm,
There are great communities, and this is something that I've really plugged into in my year. Um, there are a great community of people doing this, right? So it's the internet's a wonderful thing for this. Connecting with you and connecting with other people who can talk about this kind of stuff is so importantly, it's so vital, right? So if anybody is out there trying to go it alone, just know that that is not the best way. Go find your tribe, find people who are building their businesses, find people who have gone before you. I have a great friend who I was in the Navy with. She runs a nutrition coaching business where she talks to people about how nutrition affects your mental health. She's been doing it for years longer than I have. And in 5 conversations with her, I learned more than in 5 months of me doing it on my own. Right. So you can find that community even if you're not at a company. The other thing that I've heard, and I was just listening to one of your previous guests, one of the musicians talking about her entrepreneurship journey where she like worked her way out of her day job. That's a great way to do it, right? It just takes, make sure you're setting those intentions because you can get distracted in your day job.
mm,
And so if you're doing the night, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs call it the night and weekend route. If you're working a day job, make sure you're committing, and you understand the cost of the time and the effort it's going to take. But you can do that through night and weekends, and you can forego some of this uncertainty, which is a lot of the hardest part. And so that's something I've been exploring myself. Is there are jobs that I wouldn't mind getting back into, developing some professional skills, but this coaching, and I'm getting more and more around to, giving services to people who have come up through the pipeline like I have, whether it's through veteran services or people coming out of poverty. I want to continue to build that no matter what I do, right? So if I, to pay my mortgage, I work a day job, that's great.
mm.
Entrepreneurship is more than about the money, right? It's about that goal value alignment. And that is something that I found. And now I don't want to let that go, even if I have to work a day job.
Yes, no, like this is the thing. I like starting off entrepreneurs, like yes, it is 80 hour week. And then
Yeah.
to get things going, especially if they're doing it, yes, working a 9 to 5 and then doing like the thing to get them through. Because like, don't get me wrong, like there are people which are like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna just quit my job. I'm gonna go like this, like, and away I go. And you're like, and you kind of like, okay, where are
Good
you?
luck.
Life. Yeah, is that going like, yeah, look, if you're in that sort of early 20s, like sort of like this, like, yeah, ramen noodles and living out of your car, you go for it, no problem. If,
Yep.
if you're in your 30s and like, yeah, starting a family, or in your 40s, you're starting a family and stuff like this, yeah, that's not gonna work. It's like, it's,
Yeah. And it goes back to honing your efforts, right? Like if you can see value in your day job and you can pick up skills that are going to help you in your entrepreneurial journey, there's no reason you shouldn't be like getting the best of both worlds, right? If you're doing something that's completely draining and toxic, then maybe try to find a role that would allow you to build your entrepreneurship on the side. But I think sometimes we fantasize, and as somebody who quit his job and then lived off of savings for a year, it's very stressful, right? And there are a lot of sleepless nights, and it doesn't bode well for your mental health in a lot of ways. Um, but when you blow things up, I think sometimes we romanticize that as the way to go, where small systematic changes over time is the formula for success. I think that is if we can just drill one thing home. So whether it's journaling 1 page a day for a year, whether it's doing, an online course where you learn about if you want to break into anything, marketing, just do 30 minutes a day for a year, you would be amazed at what you can do after 6 months, after 3 months. Like the systematic small changes that make a difference in our life. And so while it's romantic to be like, oh, he blew everything up and started this amazing company, he's a unicorn. That's not where the true value is generated.
yeah, no, I know that absolutely. You remember, you got to. How do you build a house?
A brick at a time.
That's oh yeah, that's which is quite mad. I got blow it up.
And I think you learn so much more too when you can take the small bits of information, right? So I did this today. I laid this brick and it was a little bit sideways. Well, why was that sideways? Why didn't that fit? What do I need to change tomorrow? When you can do that repeatedly, that's when you're unstoppable.
Mm.
Nothing can stop you. No setback, no financial difficulties. Like those little moments where you can take to learn, take advantage of those.
What would you say has been one of sort of like the biggest lessons you've learned in the last 2 years?
Biggest lessons I've learned in the last 2 years. It really is to listen to yourself. Like listen. So our bodies are phenomenal, right? It's an intricate system of sensors and feedback loops, and we're aware of maybe 1% of it. But if you listen to it, you will find so much information on what is beneficial, what is not beneficial, like, and you can then cut through the bullshit, right? So when somebody tells you to do, if they're like, oh, you absolutely should just go work in finance because you'll make a ton of money, even though you'll be miserable. It'll pay off by the time you're 50. Like listening to your body can tell you that's not the route I'm going to take. Like I'm going to take a different route. So I think that's been the biggest value I've gotten.
Mm.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Listening to yourself because it's one of those things where no, because like 2021, like going from working in one of the biggest companies in the world to like go see you later, then to like go, okay, gonna start coaching, I'm gonna start doing this. It's like, yeah, it is like it's I would say it's a little bit more of an extreme shift from you going from the military hyper structured to like say, to a company which is still structured to something now where you're out there by yourself, no structure,
Yeah.
no sort of direction, like which a lot of people who've like served. That is one of like you like. What do you mean? I have nothing to like sort of like go. These are the rails, and this is how I'm going.
Yep.
You know,
No bumpers. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, So if you think about it like a scientist and or you come at yeah, from like a scientist would think about a hypothesis, right? When I joined the military, I
Mm,
thought, man, if I just have stability, then I will be happy. Right. And I'm going to use the word happiness, even though I've since moved away from that in life. But let's just say I'm going to be happy. And then I got that. I attained that. Right. And I was like, okay, it's very stable. Why am I not happy? Like something's missing. And so it was like, okay, well, maybe then if I get my degree and go to a company, then I'll be happy, right? And not only did I go to a company, I went to the company. I went to Apple and I made the money and I got to sit in the big rooms and I got to do the cool shit. And I still wasn't happy, right? And so you're like, okay, what is that doesn't make sense. So my hypothesis was stability would make me happy. I got that. That didn't make me happy. Money will make me happy. Well, I got that. That didn't make me happy. Well, now I have an X. I don't know what it is. The variable is unknown. And maybe I'm solving for the wrong thing. And so then you learn about fulfillment and you learn about aligning your goals and your values. And so now I'm like, okay, X equals fulfillment, solve for X. And that's what I spent the past year and a half doing is solving for X. And I'm finding that it is listening to yourself and understanding what does bring you that fulfillment, understanding that happiness is a feeling, just like motivation is a feeling. Feelings are going to come and go. So you can't always rely on feelings. Like use them as indicators, but you can't, you have to act whether you feel like it or not and move forward in those small steps. And
mm,
so that's the way I've approached it, right? So it's been a jarring transition, but the way to think about it is like, well, I tried to do that. I thought that would work. It didn't. Thought that would work. It didn't. Let's try this.
mm.
And it's a discovery, right? It's curious discovery.
Yeah, no. And like this is the thing. I think if you're not constantly trying to discover who you are, where you don't actually understand where you're going to be possibly going.
Yep.
Until like, well, until let's just say until it might be too late.
Yes, and that well, and too late, or just you realize, wow, how much effort was wasted, right? Like if I took that time in my 30s, if I took that time in my 20s, which is now gone, if I took my time in my 30s, which is rapidly coming to an end, how would my 40s, 50s, and 60s be different, right? And so I don't think it's ever too late to start, but I don't think it's ever a better time to start than now, right? Like get if you can get on it, even in small changes, just make such a drastic difference.
Mm, absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
and you realize, I was gonna say the other thing is, we've talked about exercise, we've talked about work, we've talked about that. Some people want big bank accounts, they want six pack abs, and they focus on those as like they focus on the results instead of the process. Where it's like, I have no doubt that once I align my goals and energy to my values and what brings me fulfillment, I'm going to have a big bank account. I'm going, like just like if I go to the gym every day to stay healthy, so my body doesn't break down, I'm going to have a toned body, right? That like I'm not striving for the toned body, but it's going to be a byproduct of my efforts. And so I think once we stop focusing on results as much as process, we have a better chance.
Yeah, no, I agree. But like I would simply say this, I think people, too many people, especially it like I keep on saying in this age because in this age we living of like look, if you went like chase, if you went back 50 years, it'll be an age of
Yeah.
magical wonders and everything like this. So many people have tied their lives into what success means. This is
Mm.
success. And if you look at anyone's Instagram like posts, looking at the highlight reels of their life, and they go, yeah, it's big cars, it's money, it's traveling holidays, everything like this, in exotic places. But
Yep.
that's not necessarily what success truly could mean for that person if they haven't actually taken that time to like look within themselves. Like when they start to do that, they can find that sort of realm of purpose. And then, like, yeah,
Yeah.
success all of a sudden like opens up to them in a way they can never imagine. Like, yes, it might result in a byproduct of money coming into their lives. It might be a byproduct
Correct.
of them getting up each and every single day and like going, looking out and go, look at our family and go, this brings me joy in each and every single day. But the definition of success is a unique thing to each and everyone. And I think people just get too caught up with the BS, the bullshit, like promotion of success,
Bullshit.
hyped up in this 21st century world we live in, where they need to, like, yeah, get real with themselves.
Well, and I think that brings up so many thoughts. One of them being, we can't forget that what we see online is a snapshot and usually a very heavily edited snapshot of somebody's life. And I get caught up in it all the time. I'm like, why am I not in an underwater restaurant in the Maldives right now? Like, why am I writing this stupid chapter of a book? You know what I mean? Like, and I think remembering that helps to be like, oh yeah, this is a very edited thing. But the definition of success that we need to work out for ourselves. I think you're correct. It's a very personal thing. For me, it's coming around to the formula of, will I have peace regardless of the external situations? So if success to me, if it meant, oh, I need $1 million in my bank account at all times, as soon as I hit 900,000, I no longer have peace, right? Because I'm not at my success. Whereas if I have peace in what I'm doing and it goes up and it goes down and my bank account is over here doing this, then like, my job title goes up and down. As long as I can maintain that peace, I think that's success, right? And I think when you redefine what that means to you, you can get a better baseline and you're way, way more prepared for the future. Because the only thing that's guaranteed is struggle. Like you can have all the money in the world and be a hot mess, right? Like you can have no money in the world and be the most fulfilled person in the world. So that money is clearly not the answer. Find your peace. Find what that means to you.
Mm. Yes, like this is the thing. Like struggle is part of the human condition, and without a little bit of struggle and effort, I think struggle, which puts a little bit of sweat on your brow
Oh
physically,
yeah.
is needed in our lives on a regular basis. Like people like go, no, comfort is no, it's great. God, I love it. But it's
It does dull your senses though. And like, and it's going to change you. And the other thing that I think about too, Ari, is like when we redefine things. So we're told everything, right? We're told what success looks like. We're told what, that life is supposed to be about struggle and not joy because, joy is lazy and all this stuff. When we have the power to rethink these things. And so one of the biggest breakthroughs that I wish I would have remembered earlier when you asked me what I learned in the past 2 years, life is meant to be joyous, right? It's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be, straightforward, but it is meant to be joyous. Joy is different than happiness. You can find joy in the struggle. You can find joy in the calm times. It's like your peace. And so when we start rethinking all these little things that we've been taught, I think it just gets us way more creative. That's how somebody, painting paintings on the boardwalk can feel way more content than a Wall Street, executive hustling deals and making millions of dollars. I think it's redefining what that is in our lives, but that takes effort
yeah,
and intention.
absolutely. Like what you said earlier, happiness is an emotion. Okay. Like
Yep.
true joy is a mindset. And when you
Yep.
have that, whew, you know what I mean, you can be unstoppable.
Unstoppable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
have to ask now, why a book? Why did you decide to do that? Come on now.
So this is a bucket list item. If you ever, I don't know what you dreamed of as a kid, I love the idea of one day. I thought it would, or a fiction novel. I thought I would write some great fiction story. But it comes to find out, life is better than art sometimes. And
Yeah,
so the fact that people were enthusiastic about it, I shared the idea with some friends beforehand and they loved the idea. So I took the opportunity. I was like, I'm going to write a book. So
yeah. Like this is the thing. Okay, writing a book, many persons Everest. Like, yeah,
yes,
like, yeah. How long did it take you to come up with the concept and basically from concept to execution?
you might not believe this, about 3 weeks. So I, so it was one of those things where I think when you're listening and you're open to opportunities, that you'll find out there's a lot more going on in the world than you're used to seeing. And this one was a conversation I had with an old professor of mine, and he kind of casually mentioned it, and I was like, "Oh yeah." And he's like, "Well, what would you write a book about?" And I was like, "I think I would write a book about the things that are going on inside our heads." Right? It was just a throwaway comment, and he was like, "You should write that book." And I was like, shut up. I was like, I'm not going to write that book. And he's like, you should write that book. And I was like, ha ha ha. And then literally I sat on it. My brain percolated for 3 or 4 days. And my inner cheerleader came out and said, you should absolutely write about what this other son of a bitch is saying in your head and let the people know that's a lie. Like, and that's how it came about. And Anxiously Fearless was probably 24 hours later. I was like, oh, that's life.
Oh, jeez. Oh, good God.
Yeah.
Oh, you was like, okay, I've done a book. Like when you went back to that professor and said you've done the book, what was it? What was their reaction?
So what was funny is I asked him, I said, can I actually write a book? Were you just joking? And he was like, no, I'm not joking. I was like, you're sure that I, Joe Vandecar, can write a book? And he's like, yes. And I was like, okay, we'll give it a shot. I was like, let's do it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah. He just laughed. He was like, yeah. He's like, and his thing was he has this wonderful ability. His name is Eric Hoffer. He has this wonderful ability to bring out what you already know yourself. And he was like, you've probably been writing this book in your head for years, unknowingly, but you've been thinking about it. You've been, curious about it. He's like, now we'll just put it on paper and we'll give you the resources and the editors and everything you need to get it out. Yeah. So, yeah. And I will tell you, every step of the journey, I just started revision. So I have the manuscript turned in. The first draft is mostly done.
Yeah.
And I have an editor now, and she's come back to me and she's like, it looks really good. This is what we're going to work on. You're a little wordy here. Your transitions are really rough. And I remember being like, I can't do this. You're out of your mind. I can't. Like, I wrote it, of course, the first time, but like, I can't rewrite it. Like, and she's like, yes, you can. Calm down. Like, we're going to do it week by week, bit by bit. And so that's Anxiously Fearless in a nutshell, is like, I can't do that. And it's like, well, I'm going to anyway. So,
I can't do that. Yes, you can.
exactly. And somebody told me, they taught me, it's like, just put the word yet on the end of every sentence. It's like, well, I can't revise that yet.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's fine. I guess I'll just do it.
Now, was it was the whole process what you expected it to be, or what sort of
Mm-mm.
interesting foibles came out of the woodworks while you were doing it?
So interestingly enough, we know more about what we know than we think we do. That was number one for me. It was like, oh wow, I guess I have spent a lot of time like formulating this. Two, you don't write a book on starting with page one. You write a book starting with what you're comfortable writing about. And so for the first 6 weeks, I think I wrote just kind of like maybe 1,000 words here on one topic, 1,000 words on another topic, and I had no idea where they were going to go in the book. And with the help of the editors and stuff like that, we pieced together a great narrative, identified some gaps, identified some extra stuff that doesn't need to be in there. And so what was most surprising was that it's not a linear process, right? I think we have this idea in life that, well, you start on square one and you end on square 100. And it's like, well, sometimes you start on square 50 and you then figure out what's on square 25 and then, you'll move up the ladder eventually. But yeah, writing a book is not linear. It was very chaotic, very chaotic.
No, put it this way, yeah, it hasn't turned you gray, so that's a good thing.
It's getting there. It's getting there. Oh my gosh! The other thing that happened, you just reminded me, was writing. I wrote an entire essay that I was going to include in the book, and it came to be completely false. I was full of shit. I was like, this thing I believed about the way that we like process some emotions, I thought I was 100% correct on, and then I like did the research on it, and I was like, you're full of shit. You can't put that in there. It's like, you got to delete that.
It's like, wait, where did I get this information from?
Exactly. You're like, wait, who told me this? And then I was like, oh my God. And if that's not an example of like getting to know your own knowledge and getting to know where your ideas came from, that is it's so important because sometimes you just don't know. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. My God, just like, oh no, there's like, yeah, no, Joe, you're not
well,
bullshitter. Come on now, put it away, Joe.
and then you want to fight it. You want to fight it because you're like, I just spent 2 hours writing this. Like, I edited it. It looks great. And then you're going to tell me it's wrong. I was like, it can't be that wrong. And then you're like, oh no, it's completely wrong. Like,
You know what? All I'm picturing now is you having this like discussion like Gollum in Lord. Not
my precious.
like, look, the essay is good. No, the essay
You're
is
like, no.
I don't know. Because like, I took ages to write it.
You're like, it has to be. Yeah. And then you completely scrap it. And then you're like, oh, there was another one. I included a quote. Somebody had told me, like, if you look up a line, and this is for anybody who's listening, if you're ever going to quote something off the internet,
Oh no.
try to figure out where in the hell it came from. Because I wrote a quote that was supposedly by Confucius. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to find out where he actually wrote this, right? Confucius must have written it down if he said it. And literally after like 15 minutes of searching, it was written by like some comedian in the 1800s. And like they just attribute it to Confucius. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, I will not be including this quote. Like,
This is the thing. That's the problem with quotes, right? Like, not unless if you get that quote, you know that quote's come from a particular documentary or a book or like some like ancient manuscript which has that person's name on it.
you
Yeah,
don't.
no,
Yeah.
oh,
And what's funny is like this quote by Confucius, it's like Forbes has quoted it, like the big news art, like it was on news websites that was like by Confucius. And I was like, it's not. I
yeah.
hate to tell y'all. I can tell you what book it came from, and it wasn't Confucius.
Yeah. And you know what? I am guilty of putting those quotes out there
Oh yeah.
myself because it's like, yeah, that sparks the right emotional feeling for me right now. In a way, it's like don't I seem smart to you? And meanwhile, there's some person like looking at me like, oh, you're just a basic bitch.
No.
Leave it be.
Oh, I love it. And then that's the other thing, intellectual humility, right? Like if you can step back and laugh at yourself and be like, oh yeah, I've taken that shortcut. Or, oh yeah, I've done that. Like grow from it. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just grow
Absolutely.
from it. Like,
Like, never be so arrogant to feel or think that yes, you know it all. If you do, you are in for a fool.
and you're just going to be so hard on yourself. And then when you're hard on yourself, this is the other thing that I didn't get to mention is like self-discovery, self-development, self-awareness isn't just about yourself. It makes you a better human. It makes you a better employee. It makes you a better manager. It makes you a better friend, a better lover. Because once you start realizing these traps in your own thinking, you then see the humanity in others and you start seeing when somebody reacts a certain way, they're not reacting because they hate you or they think that you insulted them. They're reacting to their own internal triggers, right? And their own internal thing. And I think that's so powerful is to move into that better realm of just seeing the humanity in other people by acknowledging it in yourself, right? Like I know that sounds really foo-foo and stuff, but it's true. It calms you down so much. Like
Yeah,
it just mellows you out.
absolutely. But that's what critical thinking is, you know what I mean? Being able to take your perspective, but other people's perspectives, and be able to mash that up. And then, yeah, you might, somewhat like your essay, you might go, oh, what I'm coming from is a whole heap of crap. But this one element from here,
Yeah.
now if I marry up with that person's thing and they've got bits of crap there, a new thing comes out of that sort of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Sometimes a better thing, which should help elevate us all, or sometimes something dark and twisted, which should be locked away.
Exactly.
But yeah, either which way, like yeah, critical. Let's keep on the positive, me one. No, no, like
No, yeah, exactly.
but yeah,
Yeah. And
I was about to say through critical thinking, when it's applied in a positive manner, it's the
mhm.
tide what raises all ships rather than being like, yes, the sort of sand which can bring like basically drowns us all, you know? That's why.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we take instead of taking our hurt and our insecurities and projecting them on other people, we take our understanding and we take those critical thinking skills. And let's project that on other people, right? Let's be like, oh, I believe most people are good, and I believe most people are not out to get me. So I'm not going to react in a way that says otherwise, right? I'm going to react in a more understanding, curious.
Mm.
Let's be curious. Not, yeah. So it's just flipping that switch. And sometimes it is a literal switch that you have to flip. There are days I wake up and I'm like, I feel completely defeated. I feel exhausted, and there's no way I can accomplish. Even this morning, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to talk on this podcast for an hour and have anything interesting to say. I am leaving this exuberant and joyful and happy, but I just didn't feel it. And sometimes recognizing that and pushing through, you get the best results of all, right? Is when you recognize, but you still just take that step forward, whether you're anxious or not. Just
Mm.
take the step forward and try it and learn from it.
Hey,
Like,
there you go. There you go. I'm liking that. I'm liking that. And look, here you're saying, didn't think you'll speak for an hour. You've been speaking for like, yeah, a good healthy chunk of time. Like well over an hour. So yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah. Like I've been brilliant. I've been the host of the oh, sorry. I mean, you've been brilliant. What am I talking about? Yeah. Keep your ego in check, meanwhile.
right?
Yeah, but yeah.
No, but this is, and I will say, giving kudos where kudos is due. You create such a space that people can open up and they can bring this experience, right? And they can have these honest conversations, and that's a wonderful thing to do.
Like this is the thing. Like, look, with regards to these conversations, they help enrich me. They help keep me
Hmm.
like fresh, vibrant, and like yes, open to learning new things in this world. And so this is why I'm grateful to all the people who've come on this podcast. Grateful to like speaking to you today, because yeah, don't get me wrong, I could like be like sitting down with my missus and her friend, like watching Netflix at this moment in time. Little baby girl just sleeping in the room, just like, yeah, just like, yeah, going, yeah, mind on like cruise control, not really doing anything. But with this medium, thankfully it's around. Yeah,
Yeah.
still like have the opportunity to grow, develop, and yeah, see where my life takes me next. So yeah, I have to say thank you to like yeah, the likes of yourself, Joe, who've come on today and made it very easy. A joy to talk to.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love the way the conversation went, and I hope that your listeners got something out of it.
Yeah,
So,
like Joe, like yeah, before you go, now I have to I like this is my final thing. I have to reveal that I am a being of supreme cosmic power.
oh,
Now,
here we go.
I can grant you one wish before you say anything, Joe, with your military intelligence, working for Apple, coach, author, and yeah, just general all round nice guy. Son of a bitch. It's like, yeah, you can't wish for eternal wishes. You can't wish for extra wishes. You can't write things down on a piece of paper and wish everything comes true on this piece of paper. Yeah. And yeah, you can't wish for COVID to go away. Look, I had to provide
uh,
some arts which called on the power of Beyonce and Dolly Parton. And yeah, like I'm not doing that again. Like, yeah, there's a number of souls which need to be paid. And like I'll go into it. What would be your one wish, Joe? What would it be?
oh, I will give the wish that with this podcast and keeping in theme of it, that people take the moments that they need, they start to get curious about themselves. And if my book could be any help, check it out when it does come out in May. I'm gonna go ahead and put that little plug in there. Anxiously Fearless should be out at the end of May. But the whole goal here is to get people curious about themselves and to start learn to get joy and peace in their life.
Ah,
So that'll be my wish.
brilliant. Ah, Joe, thank you for coming on. Let the lovely people out there know how they can find you out on these interwebs.
Yes, I am pretty active on LinkedIn at Joseph Vandecar, and my website is www.jvandecar.com.
Perfect. I'll put all of this into the show notes, the description. So find Joe when his book comes out. Get his book. Yes, go
I
out.
appreciate it.
All right. Joe, thank you for coming on today. You have been a
Cheers.
brilliant. And I'd like to say thank you to you, my friends, my life warriors, for sticking with us to the end of the show. Please stay well, stay safe, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive bees you can be in this world and then some. Have a great day, guys. Yes. Peace. And we are.